Okay, and now it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Richard Wells, who, as I mentioned, was the original founder of CRE-MSD, which started in 2004, I guess, officially, but I learned about it in 2003 in the bathroom at the Canadian Association of Ergonomists meeting in London. So we had a chat. I was still at Guelph and in the process of moving back, and Richard was very excited about this new center that was being launched through WSIB and was one of my own professors when I was a student and has been a great mentor. And I worked under him at CRE-MSD before becoming the director, and we're big shoes to fill. So please welcome me joining.
Thank you, Jack, for that introduction. When I retired in 2016, I was very happy to hand over the reins of CRE-MSD to Jack. So thank you, Jack, for continuing the good work. When I did retire in 2016, we moved to Lunenburg, Nova Scotia. How many people here have connections into Nova Scotia? Good. We love it there. As I look around, I see lots of familiar faces and lots of new ones, so that's good. And certainly want to echo Jack's comment about this being an excellent group, and very privileged to come back and tell you a little bit about what happened back in 2003 and 2004. Today, I don't have many answers, but I do have questions, and the purpose of those questions is to give you perhaps an insight into the thinking that we did back then, and again, the purpose of that is to say, well, it's not the same time. We're 20 years on. We've got some experience with some of the things that we've done. What could we do better? What could be changed? And so the questions are meant to prompt that looking forwards. So by remembering the past to imagine the future. I mentioned this to a writer friend of mine, and I thought it was great. He thought it was cheesy, but I'm still happy with it. Okay, Nova Scotia. Just as an introduction here, I think everybody knows, well, maybe not everybody, but the Blue Nose, the schooner Blue Nose, is on the Canadian Dime and is based in Lunenburg, Nova Scotia. I'm sure most people know that, but what you probably don't know is that Lunenburg and the waters around it are the great white shark capital of the world. And so there's two lessons that I drew from that. One is that you shouldn't go swimming in a wetsuit with seals anywhere in Lunenburg. And the second piece is that the great white sharks have appeared because of global warming, climate change. Which brings me to an idea that I want to put back on top of the talk that I had designed, because I think it might be helpful. Climate change is what some people would call a wicked problem. I don't know if you're familiar with that term. I wasn't. But reading it, I immediately brought to mind some of the issues that I'm going to mention. So it's a wicked problem is not evil in a sense. It's just a difficult problem. So it's a bunch of issues that are all mixed up together, usually socially complex, often lots of stakeholders with different ideas, and issues around health are almost all wicked, workplace health, MSD prevention. So we're in that big ball of wax, you could say. And the literature, such as I have seen, says every problem is unique. But they do have some recommendations And those include collaboration, conversation. And in addition to that is trying to get a shared understanding of the problem. And one of the ways of doing that is through visual models. And so I was happy to see a visual model. Yeah. And as we move through, I'll maybe highlight some of the things that kind of correspond to that. Now there's an academic literature that talks about socio-technical systems, and so climate change is probably the super-duperest of the wicked problems. If you don't quite raise to the level of a wicked problem, apparently the technical term for that is you're in a mess. So I'd rather have a wicked problem than be in a mess. So briefly, just going to have a look at how we began. I'm going to spend most of the time on the middle 3 items, but also to ask the question that Jack asked previously. So the Research Advisory Council of the WSIB had a research grants program, but in 2003, the council and our colleague, Dr. Bob Norman from the University of Waterloo, had a large part in imagining a grants program that would form centers. And they would be multi-year and have the benefit of being able to concentrate in an area of interest. And 4 centers at that point were funded, and by chance, CRE-MSD is at the top of the list, but that's purely by accident. So how do we set up the center here? Let's see if we can see some of those items that I mentioned in solution of wicked problems. Mission and goals. Now, I'm not going to read those to you, but I will just point out a few things. Bringing researchers and workplaces together. Easy to say, not so easy to do. Key questions, always a problem, getting the best questions, and passing on the best knowledge. And we'll see that again with the guideline. The goals re-emphasizes workplace-partnered, stakeholder-focused research. Primary prevention, and so I'm not going to be able to talk about the disability management or the whole issue of improving disability outcomes. And the generation of transferable knowledge. So the goals reinforce the mission. Briefly, knowledge transfer and exchange. Hold a conference every year, October the 1st. Okay, we're done on that one, check. Making things accessible, create guidelines, keeping the research real. I don't mean other research is unreal. It just means that it keeps our noses to the grindstone, workplace, injury, prevention. And there's lots of pieces that can go into that, but we should have that in the back of our minds all the time. And involving stakeholders, business, industry, workers, organized labor, injured workers, health and safety associations, other research organizations. So they were helpful in setting up our both mission and the goals. Here's some other points that are worth mentioning. Seed grants. It's hard to get workplace projects started sometimes. A lot of talking, a lot of building of trust and of links. That in itself is worth a grant. Research in workplaces and labs. You have to choose. You have to sometimes mix them. And I'll be back to that point in a moment. Wide range of research methods. Sometimes you're best to talk to people. And that's your best method, qualitative analysis of situations. Other times, other methods may be more appropriate. The question drives the method. And developing new researchers and mentoring them. Focus. Where should we focus? And at this point, I'm going to introduce a visual model. But before I do, I forgot this slide. Where are we going to spend our time? How might we decide? This is a visual model. If I'd put boxes around each question, it would be visual, but I didn't. So this is something I'm going to go through and describe what I mean by each one of these questions, and then draw some lessons from that. How well do we understand MSD? What is actually going on in tingling in the fingers, in sore shoulders, in back pain? How is that diagnosed? And how is it counted? What is the burden? What are we measuring? Disability days? Are we measuring lost time claims or reports of pain? All of those tell different stories. How good are our current MSD risk factors? Now, this is starting to get where we can go wrong quite easily, and I think these have only become clear quite recently. So, forced posture repetition, vibration and cold. So I think we're doing better there than the old thing of don't lift more than 20 pounds, which refuses to die a death, by the way I say this. So understanding the mechanisms here. We can now identify it. We've got some idea what in the workplace might be causing it. We can do that in the lab, perhaps. But how do we do it in workplaces across Ontario, across North America? Is it good enough to use a checklist? A really good checklist? Do we have to actually have some kind of measurement? Or do we have to go all in and throw the kitchen sink at it, as the expression goes? How much extra do we get if we spend a lot of time on exposure assessment? Because that's going to involve a lot of time, a lot of training, and are we getting the information that makes it worth it? Are we getting more information? So there's a balance we go. 4, really critical one, I think, how efficacious and effective are these interventions that we put in place? Efficacious means it works in ideal situations. Effective means out there in the, and I hesitate to put air quotes around real, but out there at work. Different kinds of work, different kinds of people. And how intensely and widely implemented are all these things? Changing one workplace is great. We need to change a lot more than one workplace to have a societal impact, which is what we're trying to do. Now, number 6, our charter, so to speak, is primary prevention. And so we don't concentrate on number 6, but you can imagine that, in fact, that people don't just fall off the bottom of the screen when they get to number 6. They recycle through here. So now you can ask all of these questions again, replacing a person with an injured person. So what does this tell us? If we look now down at the little green arrows, it says there's a ripple effect here. If we're not sure about one element here, or it's being done badly, or our information is non-existent, poor, it's going to affect everything beyond that. So if we do a bad job, or our information and practice is not very good, then our ultimate aim, our goal of MSD prevention isn't going to be very good either. So just as a mental exercise, I've put a little rating star here, and we can't do this here today, but you could mentally go through this and think in your work as a knowledge generator or a knowledge user, where are we in information and knowledge of these different areas? We can have the best information here in this room, but we're a selected subset of the world. How do we get that information out and get it embedded in people's lives as well, not just at work? So that brings us naturally to the guideline that Bob, I'm thinking of Bob Norman here, but Jack just told you about. So this was released in 2019, and as you're probably aware, it contains quite a lot of stuff. But I'll just highlight some of the things that I think are really worth looking at. Quick start guidelines, a lot of checklist videos and resources, and navigation to find all those things. And as everyone who's tried to access some big website knows, you can get lost, you can get frustrated, and you can walk away. So navigation is something that has been a constant problem for anybody with a website. But fortunately, this is a living website, which means we have funding to keep it up to date, to add to it, which is really important. And I've just indicated a number of things here. So there's both an improvement to the organization, but there's new stuff being added. And so you'll see that the last thing there on the bottom right is more stuff. So there's a lot more stuff. Just to finish off here, you'll notice the little sidebar is green. So green for growth, for new ideas, but you'll notice the people around the table, young people who are coming into the workplace. And I guess the challenge, I guess it's a little preachy, but I would say, what are we doing for MSD prevention for them when they get into the workplace? How are we helping them? So I invite you to think about some of the things I said, if you wish. See if it's jogged any thoughts in your mind. And talk about other people, about what could CRE-MSD do better? How do we organize it? Where should we be concentrating? And when we go to the future direction of MSD prevention later in the day, maybe it will be helpful in sparking some ideas. And the other point I'll make there, we are quite a small center, but I think the sporting kind of analogy there would be, we punch above our weight, I believe. So I think we act as a catalyst in some ways, but who could we partner with to do a better job? Lots of acknowledgements. I'm not going to read these. It's in your proceedings, so to speak, available on the web. And for those people who I didn't mention, thank you too. So thank you all of you. Bye for now.